Jamie Clark, how are you? Nice to see you.
I'm doing great. Nice to see you too, as always.
Thanks for being here. So today we're going to talk about what a CMO or what a marketing organization needs to know about SEO. And I guess the first question for me is, you previously worked for like one of the iconic brands in the world, the New York Times. Been around for hundreds of years, has everything you could ever want in terms of expertise, authority, trust, brand name recognition, and yet the New York Times has and had an SEO department. Why is that? Why is SEO necessary and important for an organization like the New York Times?
Good question. The condensed answer, because the website is huge and it has millions and millions of pages, and any essential to any SEO strategy is the technical component and the content strategy. News is a crazy place that's always changing, new information comes along. So it's really impossible to just ride on the wings of authority without having specialists taking advantage of all of the nuances of search and opportunities. So you can think of it as an added bonus of having a more robust team, but it's all in the manpower. And they very clearly understood how much more you can get the more you invested in it. So the ROI for them is pretty clear to prove in that way. Aside from that, I think the primary fact that NYT is playing in so many spaces makes it essential to have experts across each vertical. They're not just doing news, they have evergreen content. NYT cooking and the recipe space is a whole other beast. Product reviews with Wirecutter. So it really is a no-brainer to put resources behind each leg of this to take advantage of the broader audience you can capture.
Yeah, so I like how you separated SEO into two major buckets, like a technical bucket and a content bucket. And I want to dive into each of those. I guess with SEO, are you trying to as clearly and plainly explain to Google the purpose of a web page or a website? Is that the idea behind SEO?
Definitely. I think you can think of it as user intent in that way. It doesn't necessarily stop at just creating your website and publishing it live. So making sure that Google can access it, find it, and parse the mission of each page or what you're trying to achieve and who or what query it's the perfect match for is really essential to success there.
Yeah, New York Times, despite having an incredible brand name, is in super competitive spaces. News, reviews, they just bought Wordle. There are all these
Yeah.
Wordle ripoffs, et cetera. So New York Times has to explain, or any brand has to explain to Google the purpose of a page and why it should rank higher than another page. It's kind of a different thing for a head of a marketing department to think about, because you may be thinking about how I communicate my brand, or like what words or adjectives do I use to describe my unique proposition to a consumer, and that's important for some things, but that's not necessarily what Google's trying to figure out. It's like it's trying to match. I've searched for something specific. What's the best microwave, or what's the best whatever? And I have to figure out the web page that best answers that question. Let's actually unpack that a little bit from the content side of things. So we can take any query, whether it's home security or microwave or a news content or whatever. What are the various elements that, from a content standpoint, that Google might be looking for to determine whether or not a page is relevant and appropriate to answer that question?
Yeah, so if you were thinking about, all right, what is Google's top line mission, right? As they stated on their website, to organize the world's information and deliver the most relevant results and reliable information. So if you're the content creator, you're really focused on quality content, condensing what they need to know and delivering these easy answers, if you will, with the details to support the topic that you're trying to target. And are you delivering this in a fast way to users at all speeds, all devices, middle of nowhere, to big cities that have 5G? And at the core, does this solve the searcher's problem? And does it solve it better than anyone else on page one? So analyzing the competition, seeing what your page is missing, maybe is a new question that people are asking, especially if it's an evolving space. Or to go back to the news example, if it's COVID-19, a search term that was never searched before December 2019, how is the space changing? And are you directly updating the page to capture the latest information that someone would need to know? Even if it was about microwaves, is there a new technology for microwaves, or a new brand, or a new model that people are asking for? So are you really taking care to update your page with the most meaningful and latest information is a key part, just from the straight content strategy side. But it's all relative to everyone else as well.
So what I'm hearing is one part, which is for a piece of content, are the words used associated with the query, and if the query is some kind of question, does Google believe that the question's being answered with current relevant information? And then Google also has this notion of EAT. Would you describe this acronym, and then how Google might analyze each part of the E, A, and T?
Yes, absolutely. So EAT, for those who don't know, stands for expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. Expertise is really, think about it, if you have a problem, like let's say you're sick and have a close friend who is a doctor, you're probably likely to go to your doctor friend who specializes in the thing that you think is wrong and say, hey, I have this weird thing on my face, dermatologist. Do you have any idea what this is? Because they're a doctor. You're not going to ask the friend that has nothing to do with that space or has no idea what it is. So same concept, who are we recommending higher in search results has to do with, is this person an authority expert in the space? Google uses machine algorithms to try to understand who is an expert and who is writing about this thing for the first time. That's why it makes it easier, for argument's sake, for a site like NYT, who has had these writers, most writers who've been writing about that thing for 10, 20 years, and clearly have other connections on the web to a topic, that Google can use the knowledge graph to connect those pieces together to say so-and-so has written about this thing in millions of occurrences. And they're, always mentioned by highly authoritative sources. Get people to talk about you, link to you. That's how the authority piece really comes into play. Trustworthiness, I think, is something that is directly tied to authority, right? Not all recommendations, if you will, are created equal. So recommendations from more authoritative websites linking to you carry more weight. But satisfaction, user satisfaction, is a big piece of that too. So if Google puts you up there, you're ranking in a top spot, they want to see that users are interacting in a way that is satisfying to them. So they're using a lot of different metrics to try to better understand user satisfaction, and that kind of plays into justifying the trust.
So that's really interesting. I want to dive deeper into that. So I'm trying to like unpack all this in real time as we're talking. So there's the content on the page. There's Google's evaluation of a page's trustworthiness based on who writes it and who links to the page. And then, because Google's got all this data, they got the Chrome, the extensions, the search results. They're also seeing how a user interacts with that page to determine, as like another check, to determine if it was in fact satisfactory. So what are some of those metrics? And Google hasn't released its formula as far as I know, hasn't released the details of its algorithm. But for an SEO expert like yourself, what do you think Google is trying to? What metrics do you think Google's using?
So I believe Google is really, it gets to a fork in the road, right? Part one is goal completion. So what is the mission of this page? If it's to give you a recommendation on a microwave and send you somewhere to purchase said microwave, if that happens quickly, efficiently, and the goal is completed, job well done. The other fork in the road are really these content consumption metrics. So let's say I do a search for the best microwave. Our site is in position 1. I click on it, I look around for a little bit, and then I close the page and go back to Google and do another search. It can even be a longer tailed search. It doesn't have to be, the same exact search even. Something that tells Google, I had to pogo stick. I had to leave the website and look for more information somewhere else. So bare bones content consumption metrics, pages per visit, bounce rate is really a lot of what it comes down to. Time on site are really the trifecta package of how Google's trying to understand when people come to this page and this website, do they think it's awesome or do they think it's crappy, and are they leaving right away? If they're getting negative signals on that front, then they're going to demote you in search results in a very quick amount of time.
So good content, trustworthy content, crappy UX means you might have bad search results. And then there's the other part that you were mentioning about the technical side of things, and I'm going through a bit of a nightmare with my car right now, and so it's in the body shop, and I don't know how to wrap my head around the technical reason why my car is busted. Help me understand, simplify for me, if you will, what are the key technical considerations for search engine optimization?
So I would think of technical as the foundation. Like if you were building a house from scratch, it is your foundation. Even if you were buying an older house that may have gotten a cosmetic makeover, if the foundation is broken, even though it looks pretty, you're still going to have problems. So a key concept for technical SEO is really around building a strong base that focuses on accessibility for humans and search engines and user experience. So can a search engine read your site, period? A lot of times people will use development methods like JavaScript has been one of them, or Flash way back when, that looked really pretty, did cool animations, but Google couldn't parse what was actually in there. So that's one example of you created this great thing, but Google can't even read it. After the accessibility piece, are all of the other important pages actually findable by a search engine easily and people? So clickability, internal links are really what make up the 101s of technical SEO. Google actually even has in their documentation how to surface in search results, and the first step of it is just checking if you're findable in search and doing these basic setup rules with Search Console as well. So foundationally, I would think about it can we access it? Forget like better optimizing for competitiveness, but accessibility is a huge piece.
Yeah, you mentioned, Jamie, Google has some documentation about how to crawl it. I was surprised to learn that Google actually has like a handbook, if you will. It's a couple hundred pages. It's not like a small FAQ. It's like 200 pages of what to do on a website. Why do you think Google publishes so much information? And I know that they've revised it a number of times in the last year. What are the I guess my question is, what are the most recent things that they're introducing, and what is like the core concept that Google's trying to change and push right now?
Yeah, so the document you're referencing, the Quality Raters Guidelines, which I believe they first put out in 2015. I think the changes they've made most recently to this almost 200-page document that they have humans use as a checklist of sorts for any iterations, small or big, that they're making to the search algorithm and the way it works, are really about focused on, if you will, page quality ratings, mobile search considerations, and this concept of EAT and authority. So let's say a developer at Google introduces a potential change or tweak to the algorithm. What they'll do are have these actual people take a look at a set of search results as is today. One, you can think of it as like staging, if you will, with the change implemented. Compare the two lists and go through this guidebook to say, are the results in A or B better? If the results with the change implemented, B, if you will, are better to a human, then great. This provides better results, better trustworthy results, validates the searcher's intent better. So let's roll out that change more broadly. All of the iterative changes that they're making are really focused on providing better results that understand satisfaction at a deeper level, and surface higher quality content. So going back to this New York Times example, I almost think in the most basic way, if Google's engineers are doing their jobs right, sites like the NYT will just surface higher and higher in search results. And it comes down to the quality overall.
That makes a lot of sense. And this has been a great overview, I think, into the key parts of search engine optimization. And I can't imagine many CMOs reading the entire Quality Raters guidelines. So let me ask you a related question. Besides this podcast, if a CMO or someone who really wants to understand SEO better and deeper, like one click down, they had 30 minutes to read or watch something on SEO, what would it be?
I really think that Google's QuickStart guide is a good place too. It's almost like a SEO for dummies. If you just started your website, they also include a glossary there that is probably only 10 to 15 terms. So I think understanding the basics of the vernacular in that way of whoever you're going to be talking to about SEO or is going to be talking to you about SEO, whether it's someone you have in-house or if you're hiring an agency, understanding the basics of the concepts is really important in figuring out how you can better capitalize overall. Aside from that, I always think Moz has great Whiteboard Fridays. And again, the way they organize their video library section, it's meant to be these digestible pieces so you can keep going deeper. But they bubble up the foundational elements, and I think it just comes down to which part of the SEO machine piques your interests more or less, but having a general breakdown is the primary way you're going to start to understand which pieces are more interesting to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Moz is moz.com, I think, right?
Yes.
Right, Jamie?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about SEO as part of a marketing organization. So I guess the first question is how should a marketing organization budget for SEO? Some things you hire an agency for, consider like a one-time project. Some things are like a long-term project. Some things you want to hire full-time staff for. How should a head of marketing think about the level of investment in SEO? Like, what would you recommend?
So I think overall, there's three options, right? Hire in-house, hire an agency, or even have like a blended approach of agency plus one person in-house. So I'll start with in-house. I think you should seriously be considering hiring in-house if you have a very large website or a set of websites that make up a lot of pages that have complex SEO needs, especially if organic search is a very competitive space for your vertical. It's a no-brainer that situation will require like full-time oversight to actually be successful. One and done is not really something that's very applicable these days in any SEO space, I think. I also think in-house becomes more and more important in that type of setting, because when you think about it, SEO is really primarily accomplished through other disciplines, like UX development, copywriting, creative, and having the ability to work directly hand in hand with the in-house teams is really a key factor to success there. I think for many startups, smaller businesses, it really comes down to having the budget to support the salary for someone in-house and a more experienced person. But another benefit is that you can kind of hand it off to this in-house person and you let them run with it. It doesn't involve a lot of oversight from you. The agency model becomes probably a better option if you need the expert work, but have an internal stakeholder who knows enough and has the time to really manage and get the work done. I was in agencies for 5 years pre-in-house life, and I cannot tell you how many times we did extensive audits, delivered, huge deliverables, and nothing ever got done. Always made me wonder why they spent the money to begin with. But in that scenario, you really have to have someone who's willing to implement and run with it and be the convincing factor. I'd probably say for the agency option, probably fits for someone who has the budget to invest a little bit in growing organic and wants to like dabble, if you will, but does not have the budget for the full-time employee at that moment or part of their strategy.
Yeah, the way I see it, and this is through experience and through working with you, is SEO. You wouldn't want to redesign a website or do a major content initiative without a writer. You wouldn't want to do one.
Right.
You wouldn't want to do a product development process without a tester. And if you're not thinking about how Google will read and interpret what you're doing, then that's a big, massive oversight.
Yeah.
It feels like an agency is a good option when you need an audit, whether or not you have someone in-house, because that audit can like be another set of eyes, I guess, like a second opinion,
absolutely,
if you will. But it's right that you have to have the will to make changes, because in my experience, it usually involves some architectural changes to the site, some content changes, some willingness to move stuff around on a page and stuff like that. Let's see. Is there is there, as we kind of finish up here, is there a misconception about SEO? You know, I think I can tell you mine. And I'm interested to hear yours. Which when I started to really think about SEO, I thought it was all these like tricks and hacks and secrets that only a small handful of people knew, and you just had to find the person who knows the secret, and then you're going to get all the way to the top of the search results. And I learned that it's more about best practices, and that kind of secret sauce is more on the edge case. How about you, Jamie?
Yeah, I think best practices are essential. And I would say the secret sauce, if you will, is really in the most creative applications of SEO. And over time, the websites that can find more creative approaches and different implementations, again, back to this concept of doing something better than anyone else on page one, are the ones that kind of withstand time. So you always have to be thinking 10 steps ahead. And that's where, you know, having this dedicated resource or a vertical specific SEO who really gets the space, the business goals, and can tie it all together in this higher level strategy. I think that's probably one of the most misunderstood pieces, that SEO is just like checklist, flat, when it's really more of a combination of a creative science, if you will. And the more creative you get in the application is really what excels your website over time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so let me segue to my last question here,
Yeah.
which is that the title, the working title for this podcast is what a CMO should know about SEO. And so if you were to advise the marketing departments out there how to work with an SEO expert or a head of SEO once they've been brought in-house, what would you want them to do?
Yeah, I think it boils down to, or having the core attributes of a successful SEO strategy, even if this person is setting a strategy or putting that out there. I think it has to align to the vision. It has to be relevant, robust. So like asking yourself as a CMO, what would happen if we didn't do these things? Like, what is the potential out there? Because everyone uses search today as a way to find information and advice. I think we're too far down the digital line where that's ever really going away. So assessing the opportunity cost of if we don't do this is a good way to realize the real details behind the opportunity. But then feasibility. So setting up your SEO resource for success. The what we have to do is half of the battle. The other half is actually getting it done.
That's great advice. Thanks a ton, Jamie, for sitting down and talking with me today. It's been a great conversation. Appreciate you being on the High EQ Marketer.
Thanks for having me.
All right, see you soon.
Bye.